Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And this week, I had a deeply moving conversation with James Middleton. Now, James is a slightly different guest to normal, as he isn't strictly an entrepreneur or an artist, although some people's non-linear journeys have to be shared regardless, as you'll hear for yourself in this episode. James was actually introduced to me by next week's guest, Tracy Tully, a chat you should definitely listen out for, by the way. And although I spoke to Tracy before I spoke to James, the conversation you're about to hear still makes sense. After dropping out of a medical degree, James eventually pursued a career in the Air Force, where he found purpose and fulfillment for a long time, until he ended up leaving the service with what he describes as the gift of post-traumatic stress disorder. In this chat, you'll hear how James has been questioning who he is, what he should do, all the while supported by his wife and the therapy he sought to address his PTSD. He shares that he knows where life will take him, and this is a rare opportunity where we get to witness the beginning of a fantastic individual's emergence into their true potential and what they can give back to the world. A quick note, James's audio did have a few technical hitches, which we did our best with in post-production. Do stick around though, because this, as you'll hear towards the end, was a direction-changing episode for me, and I hope it will be for you too. James Middleton, welcome to the Not a Straight Line podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Pete. Thank you.
It's great to meet you. This is the first time we've met. Chatted a little bit briefly on LinkedIn after Tracy Tully suggested that you and I should have a conversation. So here we are.
Yeah, it's first time I've ever done one of these, and from what I've heard so far, this is the right place to be. It's all part of my journey. So thank you very much for having me.
So you mentioned your journey there. So as part of starting the exploration of that, I sent you a question prior to this call. So when you read that question, what came to mind for you immediately?
I suppose it was a bit of a rush of thoughts. My journey from, I suppose, from the start has been a zigzag or definitely not a straight line. And so I'd sort of gone back to the beginning of my formative years of childhood and thought through and kind of came up with a few different options as to sort of times when I had kind of taken a big left foot step or zagged as you called it. But for me, probably the most high stakes time that happened, or the time when the stakes were highest, was only fairly recently in the last couple of years. And my background, I was in the Air Force for almost 10 years, discharged from the Air Force about 7.5 years ago, unknowing at the time that I had a few physical and mental health issues to overcome. One of those being PTSD, which is again all part of my journey. So it's every day is a learning experience for me. But the time that really sticks out to me, I was in a bit of I suppose a flat state with some depression. I was talking with my wife one night after, once again, I've held a few jobs since I've left the military. And once again, I'd sort of gone through the process of trying to work out what's next, because there was never anything that gave me that sense of purpose or that sense of belonging. And I just wasn't happy. So my wife, just sitting there and in all her wisdom, asked me, yeah, but who is James? And the question caught me completely off guard. And it was meant to turn my thoughts inward and go, well, what do I want? What do I want out of life? But the problem is that I had no idea. It was a deafening silence, I guess you could say, that it just had me sat there wondering, who am I? And that's probably the nexus of this latest part of my journey, is finding who I am, finding what my values are, finding what my purpose is, and finding where I want to go and what I want to do. And it was such a shock that I realized I didn't have it. And I looked back and realized I never really had it. I never really had a who am I. I always felt like I was, I suppose, playing playing a character or wearing a mask and reflecting what I thought was needed of me at the time. So that's really I suppose, been the start of this next part of my journey of a lot of very difficult but very rewarding self-discovery.
Mm. And when was this? When was the who is James question landed on you?
That would have been about 2 years. It was shortly after my 35th birthday. So about June, July, a couple of years ago. So it's at 2022.
So that's a lovely holding place for us to come back to in our conversation. What I'd like to do is to go back to young James, maybe even the same age that your son is now. Do you remember James at that age, 5 years old?
I do. Yes. I thinking back to my childhood, I was incredibly lucky to grow up in a house with amazingly supportive parents. I think from the time I was 6 years old, I was living in a multi-generational household. So there was my mum's parents, my mum and dad, and then my brother and I, and always a dog or two in the house. So there was no shortage of entertainment or things to do or activity around the house. So very, very lucky.
Or input and stimulus and guidance
Yeah.
and all the rest.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And, it was just kind of one of those things. There was always something going on. Then my grandparents, I'm still lucky enough to know and see a few times a year my grandmother's brother, so my great uncle, who's 102, going on 103. And if there was ever a man who knew how to tell a story, it's that man. It was always a show and entertainment when he came over to the house for the long. That side of the family is Italian, so the long all day Italian lunches.
So what was young James into?
A bit of everything, really. I was, again, as I said, my parents were incredibly supportive, were always there for everything, and always encouraging my brother and I to try something new. So, through school, I did fairly well academically. I was social. I played rugby, cricket, basketball. Played the trumpet in the school marching band and a few other bands. Just gave everything a go. I think there at one point there I was sunrise to sunset 7 days a week, and my parents were there the whole time. So there's a lot of encouragement to do well, I guess.
In that, was there any particular kind of activity which you felt more drawn to than others, or were you just like, just give it to me all, and I'll do everything?
Well, I loved rugby, and I still do. I'm a tragic for the Wallabies. Yeah, just this last Sunday, I was lucky enough to get up before the sun rose and watch them suffer their worst defeat ever at the hands of Los Pumas, which was not the greatest way to start a Sunday. But I'm here for the journey.
They're coming over here in November, aren't they?
In November, I think so. I know Australia's going over to really just enjoy some spring tour fun, playing England and Ireland and whatnot. So it's going to be a long season, but we're rebuilding, you could say. But yeah, for me, I think the things that I was drawn to most were just things that involved people and involved a lot of that. I suppose the team being bigger than yourself was probably where I saw most of my fulfillment as a child.
Did you find that in places other than rugby?
Sure. A bit of everything, really. So I had a really large friendship group, very social, always doing stuff. I mean, the marching band was around, I think, 120 kids as well. It's one of the biggest ones in Australia at the time. And there was always just the social, the working hard on a common goal, I think, was really what drew me to those things. And just that, I suppose, in a way, I love the satisfaction of performing from the musical side. And then, of course, the rough and tumble stuff on the rugby side was really what I suppose what the two things that stand out a lot from my childhood.
I mean, it sounds like you're the classic triple threat at school. Gifted academically, gifted sport wise, and you're also creative. Like you've got all three.
I think that's actually a big part of the story is that I did so much and I had so much support, almost probably to I don't want to say a fault, but almost to a fault from my parents, is that because they were always there and always encouraging and always, I suppose, pushing me to do just that little bit better. I think that's part of what caused me to lose myself a little bit, because I developed this huge fear of letting them down and letting my team down and disappointing people. So when it came time to, in my final year, I was lucky enough. I was captain of the first 15 and I was school vice captain, and I got good marks in my, I suppose, the equivalent of the A levels that you guys have over there. I could have had the pick of any university course I wanted to do. And I chose something that I thought was expected of me rather than what I wanted to do. I really struggled there.
So let's explore both those journeys, one real, one hypothetical. What was your instinct, your heart drawing you towards?
That's a really good question. I think at university, I suppose this is the crux of the problem is when I look back, the thing that I wanted to do was not be a disappointment. That's all I can really remember from that time. I wanted to not be a disappointment. I wanted to do what would make my parents and friends and whoever else proud. So, I finished high school and went into biomedical science with the view to go and do medicine because, of course, that's a respectable career and that'll make people proud. And I mean, that's something that, that mum and dad can brag about. I really had no interest in it, and I struggled the whole way through university.
When do you think, so what I just picked up on there, James, is like all through your childhood, you're saying that you just had full unconditional support, just whatever you wanted to do, we're here for you, whether it be this or that or whatever. It seemed at some point, it seemed to change from I can do anything I want to I need to do something which is going to make my parents happy. As you reflect, can you sense that started to come in at any time?
I feel like it was through probably my year 9, 10, 11, 12, so that final high school push was probably when I became most aware of it. Just that fear or that block of not wanting to let my parents down. And I can tell you a story where this is the first time when I really realised that this was the case. First rugby game in the year 9 season. So I was 14. I rushed up to make a tackle, one-on-one tackle, caught it wrong, and I broke my shoulder in 2 places. And the two chunks off the top of my shoulder blade were completely broken off the scapula.
I'm wincing just hearing it.
So I was on the ground. I had pins and needles down my arm. Probably the first time I ever remember staying down from an injury. Ended up being taken off the field on a spine brace, on a spine board, and with a cervical collar on. And I was lying in the back of the ambulance, absolutely high as a kite on the magical green whistle. So it's as good as they say it is. That's for sure, especially for a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I had 2 thoughts. Then 2 things I thought. 1, Dad's going to be really disappointed I can't finish the game. And 2, I'm letting my team down for the game tomorrow because I won't be able to play.
Was he? Was your dad disappointed?
No, definitely not. He was absolutely concerned about me. And this is the part that I struggle with looking back is that there was nothing. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to come about from someone who has nothing but, support.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it removed my locus of control from me. And that now I was, I guess, a bit of a performer for what other people expected of me. And it's not to say I didn't enjoy the activities I did, because I did, but it was rare that I was able to actually think, oh, how do I think I went? How did I feel about that? It was always, coming out of a performance or off the field, it was always, okay, what is someone else going to think about my performance there? Mm. So that's really probably the first time that I remember.
We will come back to that. I'm really interested to hear how you think all those kind of experiences that you had then are influencing you as a parent, as a father now.
It's going through this process of discovery, and it really started not too long, I suppose, but even before my son was born. I was seeing a psychiatrist and psychologist for my mental health, mental ill health. But it's been amazing for me to, a lot of the time, it feels like I'm seeing these things in what my son is doing or how I'm interacting with him. But I actually have the space to be able to almost debrief myself on the interactions I have with my son. And I'm so very conscious of encouraging him to tell me how he felt about something. So say, for example, he just moved up a class in his swim school. So, he's now swimming longer distances and more challenging things. And when he came out he was very nervous the other day when he did his first class. And when he came out of the pool, I made a point to ask him, how do you feel? I know you were nervous beforehand, but how do you feel now? And he said, I feel brave.
Wonderful.
Really, what it's encouraged me to do is think, rather than going with that, oh, you did so well and I'm so proud of you and look how well you did, or commenting on your performance. It's really focusing on what is his inner voice telling him, because that's the voice I want for him to be loudest.
Did anyone ask you how you felt about anything as a child? Can you remember?
Not overtly. I think it was, I'd say more of what I remember is it was you played really well, or, oh, you missed a few tackles, or, oh, I saw you out there. And it was very much about the performance and the result rather than about the process. And that's really where I've come back to in myself, is trying to really embrace and focus on the process. Because for me, some days just getting to the end of the day when I'm having some mental health troubles, getting to the end of the day is a win, and it's all part of the process. And some days that's all I can manage to do.
It does sound like you've had it sounds like an immense amount of self-development and self-awareness has gone on to get you from what we talked about as a child to parenting the way that you are. So I just want to acknowledge that and say that I appreciate it's not been easy, but you made a decision to not. It's like not repeat the mistakes of the past, because your parents were doing the best they could with what they had, with where they were, in the same way that all parents do for all time.
Yeah, I think that's it's the parent journey, right? It's everyone, I think, by and large, really tries their best. We may realize 30 years down the track that things that my wife and I are doing now have resulted in other maladjustment or other hurdles for him to overcome. So, I don't begrudge how my parents raised my brother and I, because they did everything they possibly could for us. I think it's that the hard part for me is to acknowledge that, in spite of all that, there's still things I've had to overcome. And it really was highlighted from me joining the Air Force, and then really after leaving the Air Force and seeing how the rolling effect of that has really put some bumps in the road, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Was your brother older or younger than you?
He's younger than me.
Okay. And do you see in him any of what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I do. I can see it with him as well in different ways, because, it's, even though it's the adage that no two children have the same parents, even if they're raised in the same household, because it's just things change and it's a different environment. He was never the only child. He was the younger sibling, and he had his own challenges, and I think now when we discuss it, we can see that we had, I suppose, different shades of the same color palette with those challenges. But I guess I have to say that we ended up both being on journeys that fit us the way they should.
Are you close to your brother?
Relatively close. Yeah, we're not the kind of siblings who talk every day or have Sunday dinners every week, but we speak regularly. We see each other regularly, and I suppose to me it's how I observe the majority of sibling relationships that around my friends. It's, I just think we are very different people too, in many, many ways. So, I think we're as close as we can be, given how differently we see the world.
No, that makes sense. So we've got a 17, 18-year-old James that is making a decision to go into biomedical science. Did you have an aptitude for science in school?
I passed both of my science subjects in my final years, yes. What I didn't realize was going to university that passing kind of gets you through the first day or the first lecture, and then there's kind of a lot more expected knowledge. So it was an uphill battle for something that I definitely wasn't as interested in as I would have liked to have been. It just wasn't a fit, to be honest. I ended up failing out of university, that first degree. So because of how it all played out and some repeat subjects, I ended up doing the equivalent of 2 years of coursework across 3 years. And then it got to the final semester, or that final semester that I ended up studying. I put in what I thought was a phenomenal effort. I took the entire 2 weeks of study period before my exams, and thought I worked as hard as I thought I could, and ended up failing 2 of the 3 subjects. And then at that point, it was just like, well, this clearly isn't for me. So the end of that, I tell this story. It's like that was the start of the most disappointing 3 weeks in my parents' lives with me. I went from this, I suppose, the star child who was doing science and looking to be a doctor and all that sort of stuff to in the space of 3 weeks, I dropped out of university. I got a tattoo and I got arrested. So it was a pretty dramatic fall from grace, I guess you could say.
And was that a fall from grace in your mind, or have you talked to your parents and firsthand that they were disappointed in you and what had happened?
I've spoken to them about that, and they weren't disappointed at all. But it was definitely how I felt, that I'd completely let them down at that point. It felt like I was throwing a lot away. But the public nuisance arrest, the next day, I saw mum and dad. Mum was very disappointed in me, and dad laughed. So there's very different experiences there.
Therein lies the essence of mums and dads the world over. It's like just a different attitude to risk and adventure and whatever. So what happened? What does public nuisance mean?
Well, let's say, so this was what was it, 30th of December 2007. There I was. We decided with a few friends of ours, end of university, I'd kind of made this choice that I didn't want to be at university anymore. So I was just kind of ready. Okay, look, we're in full Christmas break swing now. So we went to on a Sunday afternoon, went down to a pub by the beach, had a very raucous time, and everyone was kicked out of there at midnight because that's what time things closed at that particular pub, and it was pouring down with rain. So myself, my now wife, and a few other friends were walking down the street, and I had leant on a light post. It was clearly not stable because of the rain and the wet ground. So I decided in all my drunken wisdom that it no longer needed to be in its upright and fixed position. It would much prefer to be on the road. So yeah, I gave it a bit of a go, and it toppled over, and I was very
Gave it a rugby tackle.
yeah, gave it a good shove, and just perfect timing. The lights and sirens came on, and I was flipped onto the bonnet of a police car. So that was a very sobering moment for me.
Yeah, this sense, James, of this internal sense of what we think other people are, or what other people's internal sense is such a common thing as humans. But how can it be? I mean, it's difficult enough to know ourselves, let alone other people. But I can see how at that age, bearing in mind that the first time you recognized that you were 14, the sense of letting your parents down, you've had like four years of that unaddressed thought, I suppose, just gaining stronger and stronger weight and meaning in your mind to then fully manifest in what you described as the most disappointing 3 weeks of your parents' parenting career of you, which in reality, you said your dad laughed it off.
Exactly. And it really is interesting to look back now with a different view of the world. And I think it all comes from that, that feeling of, oh, I'm worried that someone else is going to be disappointed is less of a reflection on what other people think and more of a reflection on the lack of self-awareness or the lack of self-identity that I had at the time. Which I think, which looking back, kind of funnily enough, I think set me up really well to go into the Air Force and do very well, which I did. I had a very good career in the Air Force because I was somewhat, I feel, look back now as an empty vessel, joining the military that they could fill with as much esprit de corps and mission first and service over self that they wanted. And there is, I wasn't going to say no at all. That was like, yes, great, this is fantastic. Let's get going.
As you look back, do you sense any sense of shame in you in maybe the 3 weeks or other parts of your childhood?
I held that shame of getting arrested and dropping out of university for quite a while, and it probably wasn't until I was maybe 3 or 4 years into my Air Force career that I realized, this is where I'm meant to be. That was just looking back. Oh, that's just an expensive learning curve with the university debt that I accrued. But hey, it got me to a point where I was doing something that I enjoyed. I really enjoyed, and I was really good at. It just fit for whatever reason. Just the structure and the way things were taught and the type of things we were doing in aviation was just. It's like my brain just went, "Oh, this is awesome. Let's get as much of this as we can."
So how and why did you end up in the military, and why the Air Force in particular? You've been arrested. Did you get a criminal record?
No. I paid a fine, and it was dusted away. So that was all fine. Although it did raise a few questions as I was joining with the recruiters. Oh, why did you get arrested? But it was fine. But why did I choose the Air Force?
Why did you choose the military? Why? So you're at another point. You're at another point in your life where your life can zig or it can zag. Neither's right, neither's wrong. You got a choice to make. The last time you made a choice, with hindsight, you recognise that it wasn't the best for you. You chose biomedical science. When, if you had a chance again, what would you do?
I think I would have done something less sciencey and more computery or IT. That sort of programming, coding, that sort of thing. Just because I just like knowing how things work.
So your life zigged and it's now zagged, and you've got a tattoo to show for it. So it's not all bad. So you're now at another point in your life where you've got another choice to make. Were you conscious that you were making another almost pivotal decision about what you did with your life after the tattoo and the arrest?
I was very conscious that the decision I was making there was more pressure than ever for it to be the right one. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I absolutely knew what I didn't want to do. And that was, I did not want to stay at university. I did not want to change courses and going back and study. That university learning environment just did not work for me. It just was not enjoyable at all.
What else didn't you want to do?
So I knew I didn't want to go down something that was I wanted to do something that was more hands and feet rather than learning from a book, I guess. So that's really what I was thinking about. So I had, there were two things on the boil at the time. One was the Air Force, which I'll come back to, but the other one was, I'll just go become a personal trainer. I can eventually open my own gym. I can do all these sort of things and it'd be great. Yeah, that was short-lived because I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do. That was definitely that was something I can sort of just jump on quickly and get out of the study.
And didn't also have that team, that sense of camaraderie and team, which you talked about earlier.
Exactly right. It was that was going to be a solo journey for sure. The idea of joining the Air Force was sort of first came up probably in year 11 or so. Yeah, before graduating high school, we were like, I can go to the Defence Force Academy, get a degree, do all that sort of stuff. But that didn't interest me, going and doing that. My dad was in the Air Force for 3 or 4 years in the early 90s. And he always speaks very fondly about his time there, even though it was a short service career. He always spoke about how it's completely life-changing, the way you get to work with the team, the friends you make, the things you do, you just can't do anywhere else. So I thought, okay, well, let's look at it again. So I got online and looked up defence jobs. I just thought I'd give it a go. I went in there for a careers information session and did some initial aptitude testing. And from that moment, really, I was like, this seems okay. This seems like something I could actually do. I could see myself doing that more than I could ever see myself continuing on at university or being a doctor or any of those sort of things. Perhaps it's the way that Defence Force recruiting works, is it really tries to put you in the position from the first moment you step through the door.
The recruiting door.
Yeah, the recruiting door. So it's like, look, this could be you. It's almost like at Disneyland or something where you put your face through the Mickey Mouse cutout. So it's like, it's almost like, hey, this could be your life.
How do they do that? How did you experience that?
They have real people who are in the recruiting centres. They have people in uniform who've done these jobs, who've lived the life, and they're all storytellers in their own right. They tell you about their career and how your career could be like that, or it could be like something else. It's far more. It's still not an accurate representation of what life is like, but it was far closer than being at university was to having a job. It's where it's all completely academic, and it just felt right. I can't really describe it, but it just, from these things, it was just it felt like nothing but opportunity for me. It didn't feel, looking back now, and even at the time, it didn't feel like there were any hurdles. It just felt like, oh, this is the path I'm on, and it feels right for now. And it turned out to be a very good path.
Yeah. Was there any sense, even in the back of your mind, that this is something that your dad would be proud of you for because of his own military career?
There definitely was. And I think that was probably what really encouraged me to look at it again and look at it with fresh eyes. But I think that was probably one of those things where I went, oh, this is a lot. I mean, a lot of people were, when I told them I was dropping out of university and going to go join the military, from friends and family friends and other relatives, it was a bit of like, oh, why are you going to go do that? But from Dad's own experience, he's like, oh, no, he got it. He understood why.
So from the outside world, it might have appeared like you were zagging from university to military, but internally for you, did it feel like this was like the obvious next step, almost like it was a straight line? It's like, okay, I'm on this trajectory. This is like the next best thing for me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it didn't stop feeling like that really the whole way through. It was like the square peg had found the square hole, whereas before it felt like I was a bit of the square peg in the round hole or the triangle. It was always trying to fit my shape into something else. But as soon as I put that uniform on for the first time, it just felt like I was part of something that was bigger than myself. Like I can remember putting on my uniform for the first time and having the RAF ensign on my shoulder and looking down and going, that's bigger than me, but I'm a part of this, and that feels good.
What I don't know military terminology, but what regiment or role or whatever did you have?
So I was the job still exists, but it's a different terminology now. But when I joined, when I was an air battle manager, which was I was lucky enough to finish up as a mission commander on the E-7 Wedgetail. And the Wedgetail is a big Boeing 737 aircraft with a big surfboard looking thing on the back, which is a giant radar. And it's the most advanced airborne early warning and control platform in the world, still is. The UK and the US are currently in the process of acquiring them themselves after they saw the Australian Air Force operating them in Iraq, Syria, and then more recently in Ukraine. And that was, again, that job just fit me as well because it's a multi-crew aircraft. There's up to 16, 17 people on board at any one time, all doing their job to work as a team to achieve the greater mission. So yeah, and it was actually the people that I met through my initial training that drew me to that job because they were good people. They were team focused people. There wasn't an ego among them. And I thought that's where I want to be. That's where I want to be.
I mean, on the face of it, James, it sounds like you had an idyllic childhood, full support from your parents to explore all different aspects of life and your personality to find what suited. And there's a little bump, and you got a tattoo to prove it, but ultimately, you found your groove, you found your team, you found your sense of purpose, you were involved in something bigger than yourself. Why were you only in there for 10 years?
That's a great question. At the time of leaving, so I did two back-to-back deployments to Iraq and Syria, lots and lots of flying, and I'll talk more in detail about that in a moment. But I got to the end of my time in uniform, and I was just, the only word to describe it is done. My mind was done, my body was done. I just knew I couldn't do it anymore, but I didn't know that at the time. I left voluntarily, but years after that, probably 3-4 years after that leaving, I'd been seeing a psychologist the whole time after leaving because I was struggling to adjust, dealing with things, anxiety, a bit of depression, and a lot of challenges, but nothing that I could really put my finger on. And I didn't talk about the military stuff at all until I had an absolute breakdown, just fell in a heap, had an emergency call with my psychologist, went to see her a couple of days later, and just started talking finally about my military service, talking about nightmares that I was having, talking about how afraid I was of places and crowds and loud noises and how I couldn't sleep and how there was just all these bits and pieces. And through that process, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I thought at the time, that's really strange. I didn't even think that could be something that I would be suffering from, because, you see, in the media and, I suppose the way it's presented out there is that generally people who come from military service who have post-traumatic stress disorder, or at least the way I was aware of it, was that they might have been driving in a vehicle and run over an IED, and, explosion, body parts, blood, gore, people dying, screaming, the whole lot.
Or they've killed people, or they've seen people killed. And
Exactly right. And what was actually explained to me is that the way the stress center of your brain, so the lizard brain, the amygdala, what runs your fight, flight, flee, and freeze system, when that gets overwhelmed, whether it's through acute stress or chronic stress, the end result is the same. The way it was described to me was, say someone's playing football, they try to change direction, their knee slides, and they've ruptured their ACL. Straight away that this is a debilitating injury, surgery, rehabilitation, the whole lot. But what about someone whose knee, they have maybe a bit of tendonitis or a bit of arthritis, and they don't really do anything about it. They keep going, overloading that knee a bit more injury. I'll stop for a bit. Okay, back into it. Nothing. And then the tendon gets so inflamed that they rupture their patellar tendon. Now you've got two knees, both require surgery, both require huge amounts of rehabilitation. The end result's the same, but the causal factors, or the path to injury is very different. The same applies for PTSD. So in my case, it was as an example, for the 4 months that I was deployed the first time, we flew 45 times. We conducted 45 combat sorties. Before each one of those, I made my bed, I straightened my room, I put a letter on my desk that was addressed to my wife, and I made peace with the fact that I might not come back. And no one talks about it.
So that's like 45 times in a 4-month period where you're effectively telling your subconscious brain that you're going to die.
Yeah, that's it. And then you layer on top of that our crew has the world record for the longest Boeing 737 flight, 17 hours and 12 minutes. And for every minute of that 17 hours and 12 minutes, it was my job to make decisions that would move me, my crew, my friends, our allies in and out of harm's way. And you could make a decision that means something isn't where it needs to be, which means the people on the ground who are getting shot at aren't getting the support they need. Or you could put two aircraft very close to each other and have an accident, which nearly happened a huge number of times, because as big as you think the sky is, when stuff's moving at 500 miles an hour, the sky gets very small very quickly. And then on top of that, we're reviewing if there's a strike that's going on and kinetic weapons have been used against the target, human or otherwise. We would end up going through and reviewing those weapon system videos from Australian and coalition aircraft. And there's only so many times you can see a guy on a motorbike get blown up by a 500-pound bomb before your brain goes, this isn't right. And I look back now as being in the room when we were reviewing that. Everyone's cheering and woohooing like as though your football team's just scored a goal or something like that. And I look back now and it's interesting to think about, because I don't see myself. I don't feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm outside a window looking at myself there.
Would you have been participating? Would you have been woohooing as well?
Right. Absolutely. And that's something I look back on now with a lot of shame, is that's not, I don't. I suppose you get caught up in that sort of environment and you feel like that's the way that you're expected to behave and everyone's doing it. And, you end up having fun in these high risk, high reward situations. But I didn't realize until later on that, a lot later on, just how bad it was. But my wife knew straight away when I came back that the person that went away and the person that came back were two different people. I came back broken. I didn't realize how bad that was until a lot later, but it wasn't the same person that went away, that's for sure.
You mentioned when you got arrested that your future wife was with you at the time, and you just mentioned her then. When did you get married?
So we've been together for 20 years this year. So we met in high school. We played in the marching band together.
What's her instrument?
So she played the clarinet, I played the trumpet. And we got married in 2010. So coming up in this month. It'll be our 14th wedding anniversary. We've been together for more of our lives than we haven't. And yeah, it's classic example of, she knows me better than I know myself. Hence the question that she asked me when we went back at the start of who is James?
Who is James? Yeah. So you mentioned about the James that went away was different to the James that came back. She didn't move around with you to wherever you were.
Not when I was deployed. No, that was we were operating out of a base in the Middle East. But yeah, I proposed the day I finished my initial officer training, and she moved down with me. We were together the whole time. We moved together everywhere that we were posted to while I was in the Air Force. And because we both grew up here in Brisbane in Australia, it was when I left the military, it was straight back up here. And we've been here ever since.
So you get a diagnosis of PTSD. What happens then?
I feel like I find it quite interesting to think about, because I didn't feel like it was that, oh my God, I have, post-traumatic stress disorder. I feel like the world's falling down. It actually felt like a lot of things that I'd been feeling and struggling with the preceding 4 or 5 years, they suddenly made sense. I all of a sudden had an understanding of why this was happening. Now, the journey through treatment and acceptance of parts of me that I probably will never change and will always be, for lack of a better term, broken, has been incredibly challenging.
How do you go about treating PTSD?
There's a few different ways that I've gone through. One of the most effective is a treatment called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, reprioritization, or reprocessing. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, I think it is. But what that is essentially the therapist can use a hand or side to side tapping on your body, or a light that actually makes you hold your head still, move your eyes back and forth rapidly. And while that's happening, you talk through the event or something that is causing you issue. And through that process, however it works, again, I didn't go into medicine.
Yeah, we've already covered that part of your story.
Yes, absolutely. Your brain just somehow reconstructs that memory to be not so traumatic. It's almost like it takes the sleeping bag that's come out of the packet and neatly puts it back into its container and puts it away.
So how do you do that though when there isn't a specific event? You didn't see the Jeep in front of you get run over and go over an IOD or whatever. How do you treat it and recall a specific event when there isn't a specific event? It's just years of living in a constant state of stress.
I think you've summed it up very well. But it's how do you do it? And it is difficult, because you almost have to wait until I start not sleeping well, or I have a recurring dream or a nightmare or a sudden reaction to something, then go, okay, great, we got that. Let's try and remember it without falling off cliff. Now go and do the therapy and try to target that little bit at a time. So it's, rather than being one event, it's now one huge event that might take, months and months and months of therapy on that one event. Now it's almost like playing whack-a-mole, or one of those sort of games at the arcade where something pops up. Okay, deal with that. And it's really taught me to go, you know what, there's going to be some good days, but it doesn't matter how hard you try to plan or shape things, the PTSD will beat you down and put you in a hole, and you have to work to get back out of it. And that happens less regularly now, but it does still happen far more often than I would like it to.
I'm aware of PTSD. I'm also aware of complex PTSD. What is this? I mean, I know you're not a psychologist, but can you tell me?
Yes. So, again, I'm not the authority on this, but as I understand it, the further back in life that trauma happens, like if trauma happens to a young child, it kind of hides itself away until something else happens, and then both blow up. And that's when you get this interplay between two things that are seemingly unrelated, but the way the brain's processing it is kind of making it very messy or very complex. So it becomes harder and harder to deal with it.
So it's basically PTSD about two separate incidences combined together.
Yeah, I could be wrong there, but that's in a way, that's how I understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Are you still in treatment? Do you ever stop treatment for PTSD?
No, it's not something that will ever go away. It's a lifelong gift that I get to carry with me. But each time I do some treatment, or I work through an issue, or I even just am able to better manage my life through avoiding triggers, it gets a little bit easier. So it's something I'm always going to have to live with, but I'm getting further away from letting it consume my life, I guess you could say. It's something I have. It's not who I am.
What's also interesting is that you described it as a gift.
I can think of it as a gift because it's led me to a lot of self-discovery and a lot of realization about, I guess you call it, self-sabotaging behavior, whether it was a part of my life before or not. The gift comes from the fact that it has encouraged me to learn as much as I can about myself, which is making me a better husband, a better friend, a better father. And it's allowed me to really look inwards to find what drives me and what I want to do with my life. So it's a hard way to get there, but I won't let it be anything other than a overall positive trajectory for my life.
And what do you want to do?
What do I want to do? Look, that journey of who is James and what do I want to do is really not just starting out, but it's in its infancy.
Well, hang on a second. Let me just, sorry to cut across you again, just delay. Let me ask you a different question. And it's the same question that you asked yourself when you were coming to the end of your university career. You knew what you didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So what do you not want to do now?
What do I not want to do?
You don't want to go in the military, that's for sure.
No, actually, not going to do that again. What do I not want to do? I don't want to live a version of myself that is what someone else expects, or what I feel someone else expects of me. I think for me personally, something I've really learned is that if you know what your core values are and you stay true to those, and your purpose reflects those values, and you take action to realize that purpose, happiness will come, success will come, but it's success as you define it, not as someone else defines it. So that's what this really has been for me, is going, well, I'm starting at this point where I had to go back to the beginning. I had to build the house from the foundation up. You know, it wasn't just about putting new windows on. I had to learn, what are my values, because I didn't have them. And the story for that is that through this process, I was talking about it with my psychologist. And she said, okay, well, if you don't really know, let's start with your values. Let's start there. What are your values? And I was like, oh, here's another question I don't know the answer to. Fantastic. So she brought out a deck of cards. And on this deck of cards each card had a word on it, like a value of something. It might, could be success or power or safety or all those sort of things.
Freedom.
Yeah, exactly. So first thing she had me do was, okay, sort them into two piles. On the left, things that you identify with, on the right, things you don't identify with. So I did that. And through that, I had another very startling realization, but just an absolute wave of clarity, is every time I looked at a word, I thought, if someone else was looking at this, would they think it's about a good value? So even in that moment, I was like, I don't know anything, but that was the point of time, that moment that I realized it was almost like this wave hitting me. But rather than I felt like I was drowning under this new weight of something else I didn't know, it almost flipped everything into absolute clarity. And that's when I realized I'd been playing a character. And it wasn't so much like, say, someone, wearing a mask, or where underneath they're still themselves, but they might be, at work, they might present a curated version of themselves compared to at home, compared to with their footy mates or whatever else. For me, it was like I was this, I kind of term it as an absolute method actor, like a Daniel Day-Lewis method actor, where I just became this character in all these different situations where it wasn't me, it was just something else. So through all that, I now took a few months to do, but I really went through and go, what drives me? And through all of that, what my values are, what my purpose is, what I've realized is that my purpose, or my driving force in life, is to serve, to help, and to help others be the best version of themselves they can be. That the absolute root of that is being a father first. I want my son to grow up to be the best version of himself that he can be. Know his inner voice, have his voices be the loudest, know what his values are. So that when he makes a decision, he's confident he's making it for him and no one else.
It sounds to me like you got a pretty good idea of who James is, from my perspective anyway, but I don't know what's going on inside you.
Yeah, I do now. God, I'm now 37 years old, and it feels like I'm starting to live the life I'm supposed to live for me. And that is, the importance to me of being a husband and father first, above all else, and helping others. So it's which is really why I've taken steps to not change my primary, let's call it, revenue generation system. I work for a big company now, but I've taken steps to do things that are more related to helping people rather than generating profit, which has been challenging working in a big company. But I is with another one of your guests, Tracy Tully. I met Tracy at a charity showcase and asked her almost immediately if I could be a part of her Veterans in Schools program that she's running, which is where people like me and other ex-service members go and speak at schools or universities or sporting clubs to help this next generation of children realize that life's not a straight line, that there are so many things out there that you're going to experience, that your results in this next exam aren't the end of the world. That being you and being a authentic version of you and living your life is the most important thing.
I'm really curious to now be talking to someone who's like on, not necessarily on the other side, but who is one of those veterans in schools. What's the experience like for you? What's it done for you?
It has been, it's still very much in its infancy at the time we're talking now. So I suppose the execution of the speaking in schools has not yet occurred, but it's going to be, it'll be very soon. And hopefully by the time, your listeners get to hear this, will be well up and running. But it is a challenging thing navigating the education system, but it has been the most incredible process to meet other people and find my voice and find my story in all of this. I can't speak with enough enthusiasm as to how critical of a step finding my voice and finding my story as part of the VISP organization has been to me going on this journey of self-discovery and doing something I really, really feel passionate about, and helping people.
And to be involved in something that is allowing almost like a younger version of yourself to experience that at the age that they need to hear it, I imagine must be incredibly fulfilling and rewarding for you.
It is, absolutely. And outside of this, I have spoken in a few schools before, and the kids out there, and this is part of why I want to do this, is in the age we live in right now with social media, there is just this onslaught of external influence on who we should be or who we need to be or what's right, what's wrong, what's cool, what's not, what's in fashion, what's not. That I just can't imagine, if it's hard for me who had my, schooling and university before social media, but it's hard for me to find who I am. How can any of these kids know who they are and not have it tainted or tarnished by the social media and the internet and all these just horrible people who are out there just making each other feel bad for enjoyment. So if I can get out there and use my story and my struggles if I can reach one child and help them realize that it's okay to be who they are, unapologetically who they are, that's it. That's it for me. I've done what I need to do.
My sincerest desire and hope is that this episode of the podcast helps more than one person. Your story is incredible to me. As soon as I'm going to be asking you the same question in a second, so you get forewarning. But as soon as I asked Tracy the question of whose non-straight line journey would you like to hear on the podcast, she didn't hesitate for a second. She said James Middleton.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad she thought of you and that you came on. So you say you work for a large organization at the moment. Are you using skills? Do you feel like professionally fulfilled in some way, or is it like a placeholder for you?
I think in the big picture, it's a placeholder for me. It's where I need to be right now. By being in this big company, it's creating safety and stability for my family financially. It's where I need to be right now, and I'm happy and content with that. One of the benefits of being in a big company is there's always avenues to explore new opportunities under that umbrella of safety. And I'm very fortunate to have a incredibly supportive team that I work with. And the work we do is really rooted in, where say personally, I would want to help an individual or help people be the best version of themselves. The work we do is working directly with, with startups and small companies to help them be the best business they can and to be successful and to learn from our experience in as a big successful business and kind of open some of those doors or break down some of those barriers to entry to the industry we work in, which is incredibly important for for Australian industry as a whole, because small business is something that Australia's economy was founded on and has run on for since Australia was formed. So being a part of that, being able to work with those people from those companies, I think it does give me that avenue to do good, to do a little bit of good every day. But it's also not exactly where I think I'm at my full capacity or at my full strength. But that's yet to come.
Yeah, beyond the placeholder, are you talking there about an entrepreneurial venture or something of that ilk?
There are, there's some things that I guess the best way to describe it is I've got ideas and drive, but it's a matter of turning that into the business side of things, which is just not the right time at the moment. But until I can do that, until I can say maybe step out on my own or move to more of a startup environment, then there's really the two things that I'm doing right now that I think are helping people is the VISP speaking, the community, and I've also recently become a DDA advocate. So for the big world of listeners out there, in Australia, we have an organisation called the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is a government-run organisation which provides support to veterans, whether you've served for 3 years or 30 years. Everyone can have access to these services, and primarily they exist to provide funding and support for ongoing healthcare and treatment for people that did get injured in service, like myself. The trouble is, it's all run by federal legislation, which is incredibly convoluted and difficult to navigate, especially if you are wounded. And the Return Services League over here runs a volunteer organisation of advocates who work directly with veterans, disaffected veterans, injured veterans, to help them navigate that system and get the care that they need. So those two things, if I was to do those two things and stay in the big company where I am, I think I wouldn't be unhappy. But it's all, with these last couple of years for me, it's all just about finding those opportunities now that I know who I am and I know what I want.
What the two words that came to me when you were talking about getting to a realization of being able to answer the question, who is James? One was awareness and one was presence. So you developed an awareness of self and accepted that where you are is okay. And I think with those two things, with awareness and presence, you will be able to make the most of wherever you find yourself.
I think that is an incredibly astute way of expressing that, because I do feel that way. Is that part of my journey as with PTSD and mental ill health is compassion and acceptance of self.
Mm.
You can't get to someone else if you don't accept where you are right now, and that's all part of the journey.
My mum's recently retired from a 26-year career as a counsellor and a therapist, most latterly towards the end with people with trauma. And she used that a while ago when I was talking to her about her work, compassionate acceptance of self. So it's lovely to hear someone who's been on the receiving end of help and therapy to recover from stuff which most people will never be able to comprehend, the kind of stress that you went through. But to hear that you know that your route to recovery is compassionate acceptance of self. I know that if my mum ever listens to this episode, she'll be, yes, that's what it's about.
It's not easy, but it works. If you show compassion, acceptance to yourself, then things will get better.
James, there's a question which I've started to ask, and I will now ask every guest, is how can the listener and I help you the most right now? Is there people that we can put you in touch with? Is there anything that you need? Because there's three of us in the conversation, you, me, and the listener. There's a whole world out there that we're connected to. How can we help you the most right now?
So, a great question. I think with where I am in my journey, the only thing I can really think to ask for from yourself and the listeners out there is when I do come knocking, please be kind. That's all I can really say. I think what helps me with what you and the listener are doing through this is getting this message out there that life isn't a straight line and there will be twists and turns and bumps and potholes. And you know what? That's how it's supposed to be. But I don't think young people or anyone really gets told that enough. And if we do, we sure as heck don't hear it. So just getting that message out there, if it can help a few people and will hopefully help lots of people, that helps me.
This conversation for me, James, I almost feel like, so this is my 21st or 22nd conversation for the podcast. And I almost feel like I've been in training to have this conversation with you.
That means a lot. I'm so happy to be able to have this conversation with you as well, Pete, because telling my story unapologetically is only very new for me. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak openly and honestly and at times very raw about me.
Back at you. Thank you for doing that, because just because the space exists doesn't mean that it's going to be filled. There is one question which the listener will know I ask every guest. You've already got a hint of it because you know how Tracy answered it. So let's pretend in 6 months' time you see an episode of this podcast drop down onto your app, and you see that it's me having a conversation like this with whose non-straight line journey would you love to explore through me?
I'd like to hear the not a straight line journey of someone who's given me a lot of encouragement to be unapologetically myself and keep on keeping on, which is her moniker, and that's Nat Coco, who is also part of the VIS community, and I hope that she would have a wonderful story to tell you, because it is definitely not a straight line.
Thank you for that. Are you able to effect that introduction?
Yes, I can do that. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So on behalf of the listener and myself, thank you so much for being present, being aware, and being vulnerable during this conversation. It's been incredible. Thank you so much.
No, you're most welcome. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks as always to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.